Going live. Okay. And hey, this is Random Access. You're here on Random Thoughts with Random and Dutch. Dutch, go ahead and say hello to the people.
Hello. How is everybody tonight?
Oh, let me see. Okay. Well, we're gonna work out this beginning here in a second. I'm still presenting. Now I'm stopped presenting. And I might be still off. Okay, now we're recording. Everything is good. If you tuned in yesterday for the hour-long show, you probably got a surprise. You got an 18-minute show of us talking about how we didn't have a show because we didn't press the record button. Today we did press the record button, and you kind of saw what it looked like. Still a little uncomfortable. We got to get the procedure written down. We talked yesterday about writing up a checkoff list. Getting close to doing that. Thinking more and more that's the right thing to do. Changing the format here a little bit too. Giving you a chance to look at the screen, see something a little different than just looking at me. On the left, the right, on one side up here, over there. That's our Facebook page that you've heard about. You probably may not have visited. That's the Random Thoughts with Random Access Facebook page. You can come in there. A lot of the newspaper articles and posts and stuff on the internet that really get a reaction out of me. I'll link to there, and that gives me a chance maybe to discuss with you what I'm thinking about. The content is interesting, and I'm interested in the content, and you should read the posts for the content. But I'm less interested in talking about the content as much as let's talk about how this content makes us feel and what it makes us think about. Try and move it to another level. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to do here. This is not meant to be a rehash of news. It's not meant to be a rehash of what's happening on the internet. It's meant to be a dialogue, a discussion about what we think about, and what we feel, and what triggers us. And those articles are triggers, so they're important, and they are filtered through my perspective and your perspective, and then because of that, we have a reaction, and then that reaction is interesting. And Shane talked about it yesterday. He mentioned it yesterday when we were talking about perspective. It's like a footprint. It's like a carbon footprint. It's your perspective in some way represents you, and by understanding it, your perspective, you understand a lot more about yourself. And we've also talked about how perspectives are hard to shift, hard to change, and they are hard to change. They take time. Perspectives include things like your core beliefs and your knee-jerk reactions and your gut feelings. They also include your childhood experiences, years and years of childhood experiences, and if you've done any long-term, real, intensive training, of more like long-term training for anything that starts changing the way you think about things. And then intense emotional experiences can really shift your perspective. It can be a real jerk to your perspective, and then you forever think about some things very differently in that one brief moment. And you can feel your perspective shifting when you have these small aha moments. Sometimes, like, I can't unsee that now. It's like now, or it's that not being able to unring a bell. That's a shift in perspective. But sometimes it can be an epiphany, a revelation, a religious experience. I mean, where you are fundamentally a different person when after your perspective shifts. That can happen, and that can happen through major life events. A couple of them relevant relevant to me are things like recovery from alcohol, living with mental illness. Those kinds of life-changing events can shift your perspective. So that's something to keep in mind. So is there anything else I want to say about perspective at that moment before I get into a little bit of what we did last night, and give you a small repeat of that? So I'm going to think about that for a second. I'm going to let see if Shane has anything he wanted to add. Did I trigger any thoughts or anything with you? my opening.
In regards to the carbon footprint or perspective, um, yeah, I mean, it's like I think that when I came up with that yesterday, it involved my core value. It involved things that are handed down from me from either my parents or my grandparents or my uncles or even a close family member, or, a close extended family member. So, those are definitely things that are built in. They are definitely deep. They're instinctual for me. Um, and in order to make a different perspective, I definitely have to check with that core belief first, or at least it automatically goes there. And sometimes that works out well. Other times, it's like I need a change in perspective because I personally have some distorted thoughts, and some of my perspective and my core beliefs are distorted. So, it definitely can put me into a different frame of mind that may not be altogether healthy for me. So I do have to be careful in going instinctually to what it is that I believe, from my core value. That's not to say that anything was done wrong or anything like that in my childhood or anything. Um, but but the bottom line is that it's engraved there, and it leads me to a distorted thought, whether it be good or bad, and with an all or nothing thinking, it doesn't leave any gray area. So so sometimes that gets me in a few troubles myself.
And we talked about perspective, and Shane alluded to it again. And in fact, he explicitly stated it, that there's your childhood memories, experiences really figure into that. Um, you could just think the difference of a person who grew up into their entire lives way out in a rural area on a farm, say, versus somebody who grew up in the middle of a busy city. You have much different life experiences, so much so that you just think about the world differently. The way you interact with neighbors is much different, because in one case you are mobbed by neighbors. You have neighbors above you, below you, or next to you, and you're surrounded with nothing but people. In the rural setting, you have neighbors, but your neighbors are 2 miles away, and um, you have to like go out of your way to see your neighbors, kind of thing. So it gives you kind of a different connection to those words and those experiences. And when people talk about dealing with neighbors, the images that you have in your head and the feelings that they evoke are different than somebody from a completely different perspective. And then another perspective might be a person who's moved around a lot. If you move around a lot, then that gives you a different sense of what does it mean to be home. If you've lived in the same house, on the same street, in the same town your entire life, you have a much different concept of home than somebody who's moved around a lot. They have home, but their home is, as the expression says, home is where you hang your hat, or home is where the heart is, or home is not a physical location at all to you, because you've never had that sense. Where somebody who's lived in the same place, I mean, yes, they recognize that physical location is different than but there's this close association with it. Home is a place. I mean, it's a little bit closer to that, where somebody else who hasn't had experience, home is not necessarily a place. It's something that you make, or something. So there can be different things like that, and so people's experience growing up affects their perspective. And so on that note, I thought I could give just a kind of a brief outline. Yesterday was a lot more detailed. Keep it short, and we'll have time to talk about it more. But for me, growing up, my dad was in the Air Force, and then he worked for the Navy, and we moved around a lot. I was not born in this country. I was born in England. My dad was not stationed in England at the time. My mom is English. She's from England. All of her relatives on her side are English. She did come to the U.S. When she was 18. In fact, landed in the U.S. on a boat. She came over on a boat and landed in the U.S. on her 19th birthday, and met my dad, and had one child, and then was pregnant with the second child, being me, the middle child. And my dad was in the middle of being shipped from stateside to Germany, and so she went home to England, and then that's where I was born. And eventually, I made my way to Germany with my mom and joined my father, um, and my older brother was with us too. And we lived 3 years in Germany, and my younger brother was then born in Germany. So I have one brother born in the U.S. I was born in England, and then my younger brother was born in Germany. And we lived in Germany for a few years, and we moved back to North Carolina. And then my dad got out of the Air Force and went to work for the Navy. And we moved from North Carolina then to, as I was about 3 years old, after having been born in England and lived in Germany. Now I'm about 3 years old in North Carolina. And then we moved to Indiana, which is a big difference from North Carolina. And then we moved out to California, San Diego area, much different than Indiana. We moved back to Indiana, so that was very similar to Indiana, but different from California and North Carolina. And by that time, I was probably about 5 years old. So you can see the moves were happening pretty quick. And then we stayed in Indiana probably for a year or more, because I think I finished first grade and was just getting ready to start second grade, and we moved to Iceland. And then we went from Iceland, Italy, Bermuda, Spain. And I was in Spain, I was third grade then. So we did second grade in part of it in Iceland, Italy, and Bermuda. And then third grade, I did part of it in Bermuda in Spain. And actually, kindergarten, I actually did start kindergarten out in California. Now that I think about it, we were out in California for a while. Started kindergarten out in California, and then we moved back to Indiana. And in the meantime, I have this memory of going to kindergarten someplace for a short amount of time that wasn't Indiana and wasn't California. I don't know if we were visiting my grandparents, and they just thought we'd better put the kids in school while we're here for a month or something. I'm not real sure what happened there, because it's just distorted memory. But then some kindergarten in Indiana, and then I started first grade in Indiana, and then it was in part of first grade when we moved to Iceland. So I did part of first grade in Indiana and in Iceland, and started second grade in Iceland, and then also in Iceland. Then we went to Italy and just did second grade in Italy, but we're not there long enough to complete. And then I went to Bermuda, finished second grade in Bermuda, started third grade, and then finished third grade in Spain. And so at that point, I had never gone a complete year in any school. We were moving enough that you moved during the school year all the time. So that gives you a different connection to what you think of when you think of your school. People have memories of their school where they went, and that was the school they went to, and who their classmates were, and you had the same classmates, throughout school. Not only my classmates were just changing all the time because we were moving. School was changing, the teachers were changing, everything was changing, and it probably affected later on. I have almost no recollection of any of my teachers, even after we started slowing down the move. We did about 4.5 years in Spain. I did finish third grade and went all the way through seventh grade in Spain. I don't really remember that much about my teachers. Let's see. If I really struggle, I might be able to dig up a name or two. And even in seventh grade, where we had multiple teachers, I think one teacher I can think of the name of. And then we moved to Florida, Jacksonville, and I finished high school there. So I did 8th, 9th grade in middle school, and that was the program there. And then 9th, 10th, 11th grade, maybe 10th, 11th, 12th grade at the high school. But even still, then I don't really feel attached to. I don't remember the teachers. Very few of the students. I really did. I talk to some of them now, 35 years later, 30 years later. How long is this? Some of them I talk to, and I know who most of them are. But it's like that's about all I know. I really don't remember how. It's like I never really made those connections to my fellow classmates or my teachers. I remember at the time having good friends at the time, but it was, I guess, that early experience kind of teaches me, the transient nature of school friendships and school relationships, and getting attached to a school, getting attached to a teacher, and getting attached to your classmates. It just was not my experience growing up, and so and to this day, it's not really my experience with friends. I'm not very good at maintaining attachments, connections after we part ways. It's like, okay, no, you You got to go. You got to make new friends where you're going. I got to make new friends where I'm going. We don't have time to be all, caught up in being friends over a long distance because, got to move on with life kind of thing. And I try to fight that a little bit. I mean, it's nice to have old friends that you talk to. They have something in common from many years ago. That's fun. But it's not natural for me. It's that's part of my perspective, and that's a hard perspective to change. And even if I want to change it, I mean, one is recognizing that we were talking about this tonight. In fact, how that kind of step zero, and Shane even mentioned this, is I got to realize that I do have distorted thinking. On some level, my thinking is distorted, and that thinking is distorted by my perception. In my description of it, I imagine this perception is this lens in front of the universe. The universe is perfect. The universe is doing what it does. There's all these things in the universe that are happening, and they are exactly described by the universe. And the universe knows exactly what's going on. But there's a perspective in front of me, and it blurs it and distorts it. So these triggering events, which are just events in the universe that I happen to notice, those events could actually just be random thoughts in my head that just pop in my head. That could be a triggering event, or that could be something that's happening right in front of me that I see or feel or hear, touch, taste. My senses are stimulated, and there's something going on in my head now to respond to that event. That's a triggering event. The stimuli is filtered through my perspective. It gets some sort of reaction out of me. It starts a chain reaction of emotion on one side and a chain reaction of thought on the other side. And then there's some sort of interaction between the emotion and the thought, and as I try to come to a decision on how to respond. So this triggering event, it's an event that triggers things. It's filtered through my perspective, and it's distorted as it comes through the perspective. It's distorted. And so now I have distorted emotional reactions. I have distorted thoughts. If I'm lucky, in most cases, it's not that big a deal. A lot of that distortion is kind of necessary in the sense of some things are blocked out. If you took in every bit of stimulus, your mind would explode. There's just too much. So you have to filter some things out. And so you have to instantly, instinctual. And Shane mentioned the word instinct. You have to just latch on to what's the important thing going on right now. Well, that important thing that's going on right now is going to be related to your perspective, because two people could look at a situation and one person could see something and they think that's the most important thing in that situation. Another person would think this is the most important thing in that situation, and that's not even something you think about in the moment, because something's happening. Your brain latches on to what's important to your brain. It's like instinct. It's like unconscious thought. It's something that's happening so quick. It hasn't even risen to the level of consciousness yet. It's like instinct. It's unconscious. It's your perspective is distorting what's happening, and hopefully in a way that makes it efficient for you to process the information. But I know I've had cases, but this is also part of my diagnosis, where I have a completely unreasonable emotional response, or an unreasonable thought response to an event. Something will happen, and people are like, whoa, what did you think? What do you think happened here? And it's perfectly clear to me what happened, because that's another thing with our distorted thoughts. They're perfectly clear to us, but when nobody else seems to have seen it or agreed, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong or that they're right, but that's a chance to really kind of ask a question that, whoa, I wonder if this is one of those places where my distorted thought is not helping me, and it gives you a chance to sort of challenge your perspective, and to measure up what's happening in your life and say, oh, but that first step was to recognize that those things are going on. You do have distortions, and then the second one, which kind of follows on, this was what I alluded to earlier, is it's really hard to know which ones are the distorted ones, or which ones are so distorted that they're not very helpful to you. It's one thing to sort of abstractly say, yes, I have distorted thoughts. Somebody stopped you on the street. Do you have distorted thoughts? Yes, I do. Do you have perfect perception? No, I do not. Give me an example of something that you think that is distorted. Give me an example of something in your perception that is distorted. And that's hard to do. It's hard to figure out which are the ones that are really distorted to the point of not being helpful, of being maladaptive. And that's where you have to rely on close friends. You have to rely on trusted parties Sometimes it's doctors, therapists, counselors.
Yeah, I can relate. I know that I talked about this last night too, during our infamous show. Um, if I was to write a book, as you know, I'm an addict. And I'm a compulsive gambler, and if I was to write a book about my addiction, it would be 16 States of Addiction, and that's because I moved through 16 states, and my addiction moved with me. And the perceptions that I had and the core beliefs that I ingrained as an addict followed me, and they were distorted. Like for me, it was normal to go out and spend all my money on gambling. It was normal to try to make the bills by gambling. Um, it was normal to do all that you can in order to make things work. That perfectionism type style of things. So, you know, that's one thing that I had to learn, especially when it came into my recovery, was that I had to be oppositional to my instincts and to my perspectives, and that's the only way that I was able to do it. And I'm no different than any other addict, because anybody will tell you the road to recovery is people, places, and things. And that is that you're kind of like changing your footprint. Basically, you're changing your carbon footprint. It's like the type of people that you hang around with, the places that you go around. It's like, instead of walk, like I can't walk into a casino. I mean, that if I go into a casino, then I'm pretty much setting myself up. Or in these days, if I walk into a grocery store, God forbid if I was addicted to scratch-offs, that would be a significant thing that I would have to stay away from. So I can understand how perspective works and what you're saying. And it was something that was very big for me, and it was something that I had to learn real quick and keep in mind for now and the future.
Mics eventually. The mics are going. The computer's responding slower than I'm pressing the buttons. That's really what's happening. So, and I'm not patient. So I push the button to turn the mic on. It doesn't turn on right away. So I push it again, and then it comes on, and then goes off.
It goes back off.
And it's like, ah. But yeah, I think that's a great. I mean, it's a wonderful title for a book, because it makes you, even just the title, without even reading the book, makes you think. 16 States of Addiction. Really kind of speaks to the depth of addiction and what's going on with addiction. But then there is the part of, as Shane was saying, this moving, and trying, location therapy. It doesn't work. And what I thought it was kind of my idea for, and maybe it's my idea for a book, or maybe it's my idea for a direction to take this podcast, at least for now, or I call it my current volume. But it has to do with perception, because perception, in my mind, and the way I'm thinking about it and explaining it as this filter in front of triggering events that now distorts our thoughts, both our reasonable thoughts or rational thoughts and our emotional thoughts. It affects our mind. And if you want to get in and change your thoughts and change your emotions, if you want to change your mind in that sense, you need to change your perspective. So my idea it's like a working title for either for this chapter of my life, or for this series of podcasts, or maybe for a book even, is change your perspective to change your mind, or something like change your perspective, change your mind. And because it has that little phrase, change your mind, there's two meanings, right? Because you change your mind because you're like you're gonna go to the movies, or you're gonna go stay home, so you change your mind, or you change your mind in a very, very deep sense. So I like that there's a layer in there, but it's change your perspective, change your mind. And that's kind of really where I want to move forward with and thinking about. And a lot of that has to do with, establishing the language of discussion, which we've been doing sort of here and that's my mathematical background. Is one of the things about math is you establish definitions. It's the rigid the rigidity of the language handshake in mathematics, right? There's this, mathematical thoughts on one side trying to communicate with mathematical thoughts on the other side, and there has to be a language handshake, but it has to be a very, very rigid language, and that rigid language is really manifest in the use of a very clear, unambiguous definitions. A mathematical definition is really, really, they can feel very general and very kind of fluid, or whatever, but they're very specific in the sense that, if something fits the definition, it fits the definition. Otherwise, you need to change the definition. So there's no ambiguity of kind of fluid definitions in that sense. I mean, they can be very sort of general definitions, but if something fits the definition, it fits the definition, and that's where sort of this rigidity comes from, and that's where the clarity of thought is important, and also not just clarity of thought, but stability of emotions is important, because this clarity of thought and stability of emotions are two important pieces inside the mind, as you try to work out how this triggering event is affecting you, and what action you want to take as a reaction to a triggering event. And so that's going to take clarity of thought. So that's a lot of addiction stuff that happens on that side. Then there's also going to be emotional stability on the other side, which is another issue. But even before you get to those two issues, there's this perspective that sits way out in front, which is the first line of defense, first line of offense. And that's the thing we're going to have to kind of fight through, or that I'm going to have to fight through. And hopefully you get a sense of like what my perspective is. And I think that, to me, is also very closely tied to empathy. A lot of empathy has to do with trying to figure out what somebody else's perspective is. I want to wear their glasses. What are they seeing? There's this expression maybe of like wear somebody else's shoes. Maybe it's wear somebody else's glasses. It's a little bit more accurate, because you want to see what they're seeing first. I can look at a situation and I see something completely different from somebody else. Well, it's hard to be very empathetic if I have no notion about what they're seeing. And so that's going to be time for another conversation, but we're already 25 minutes in here, so it's time to kind of wrap that up. I think I had a good time. I mean, I shared a little bit about moving around, to give you a sense that my perspective maybe doesn't, or whatever. I don't know, maybe I don't want to get too deep into what I think it might mean today, but I have a different perspective because I've lived in a lot of different countries in rapid succession for a very short amount of time. Had to make friends a lot of different times. Saw many different economic levels, poor countries, rich countries, poor areas, whatever, and then different languages, different, just everything different. And as I finish up, the screen probably looks different today than any other day. We got playing around with some of the things. We started out, you saw the Facebook page up there, so that's Random Thoughts with Random Access. And now I'm showing you here, this is our Twitter hashtag, RTWRE, so that's from Random Thoughts with Random Access. As stated before, you can go ahead and tweet us during the day, during the week. And you can tweet at us or shout out at us. You don't have to actually direct it with a name, but you can just tag your comment with a hashtag, and it will pop up here. This is actually a live feed. You can see the last. This is the most recent. Came in 7 hours ago, and it was me. But I put a music recommendation actually on the Facebook page, and then that Facebook page is linked to the Twitter. But I hashtagged it with RTWRE, so it makes it easy to find. And during the show here, we'll be watching the Twitter stream. I'll be able to put it up here like this while we're doing the video, so we can watch the video. And if you want to tweet at us while you're watching the video, go right ahead, tweet at us with the RTWRE hashtag. That's Random Thoughts with Random Access. The tweet will pop up. We'll be able to communicate and talk about it. I guess I would ask that try to make your tweet relevant to the content at the time. If you're live tweeting during the live broadcast, doesn't have to be relevant to the content if it's off time, because then we'll just see it and talk about it. But if we're going to interrupt the show and talk about your tweet, it'd be nice if it was tangentially related to what's going on. And then we also have our feedback line. I want to throw that back out there. You can give us a call. The number is good in Canada and the U.S. It's 15189-666-175. That's a number that's good in Canada and the U.S. 15189-666-175. It's 3 to 4 during the week, 3 to 5 on weekends, every night after the show, 11 to midnight, and it has voicemail other than that. So we can go ahead and talk about that. And then the hangout room, we're going to try and get this worked out so that the hangout room here is actually open all afternoon. I think it was 8 hours or 10 hours they can stay open. That Google gives it to you. When you open it, it's good for 8 hours. So I guess my thought is if I opened it at 3 in the afternoon Eastern time, it'll stay open until 1 a.m. And so in here, you'll be able to see our Twitter stream, Facebook, have some music playing. There's some chat. You guys can meet up with each other virtually here and have a talk. Talk about the show. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. This is an afternoon hangout space. I'll be around. Be able to communicate with me. And then all we'll do is when it's time to broadcast, we'll mute the mics. We'll do the broadcast, and then after the broadcast, we'll unmute the mics, and then we'll do the show. We'll deconstruct the show, the breakdown, and that's some of the good stuff because sometimes the emotions can get hot. You guys believe it or not, our emotions get hot around here sometimes. And that won't be. We don't record that and broadcast that on YouTube, but you might see it, here in the hangout. So that's the big changes today. It's learn, improve, share. Learn, improve, share. So we do try and do something different. Try to improve the show, and then maybe this is an improvement. I'm going to do it for a couple of days. We'll watch it afterwards in a few minutes. We'll see what it looks like. How does it look with this split screen going on here? See if we like it or not. It's something different. And I might have messed up some of the cameras and the microphones today because I was doing this new. And that's why I want to give it a couple of days. I don't know. I think I want to wrap it up and say goodbye. What do you say, Shane?
I think I just want to say that definitely use the hashtag. Let us know what it is that you think about the changes that we're making. Whether it be the screen, whether it be the hangout. Is it advantageous for you the followers to have the hangout open for a long period of time, or whatever the case may be? Your feedback definitely helps us out. So definitely, go out and give us a shout at RTWRE, hashtag RTWRE, and we'll be more than happy to utilize your questions or whatever the case may be during the show, as long as they're within the content of the show. And if not, then we can always use them at another show later on in the week.
All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. That's Random Thoughts with Random and Dutch. Random Thoughts with Random XS. We'll be back tomorrow night for another show, and we'll be moving along, and the content will start picking up as it feels a little bit like a lot of repetition maybe, but a lot of it's getting thoughts clear in my head. If they get clear in my head, then I can start picking up the pace and really moving it along. So good night and courage.
Good night, folks.